magic from him perhaps. It's a good ball. Racing. It goes towards Rohl. Brilliant save, it's in! Walsh has scored! Leicester City are in dreamland now! Vardy in the middle. This could be a huge moment. Vardy scores! And it's pandemonium in Leicester.
Mahrez with his left, Albrighton with his right. It is Mahrez. It's a good ball in. Morgan's there. It's in. Leicester City score. It is a captain's goal from Wes Morgan, who lifted the Premier League trophy in May. He might have played a big part now in taking Leicester City through to the quarter-finals of the Champions League.
Lift the trophy to the skies. Leicester City are the champions of the Premier League. 5,000 to 1.
Good morning and welcome to Blue Tinted Glasses. It is the day after the night before, well, the morning before, where we had some huge news. Finally, it was the end of Ruud van Nistelrooy's reign at Leicester City, and we're all talking about who's going to be next. So we're going to be looking in this show today at some possible managers that we've linked with. Before we do, we're joined by two guests today. We've got a third one who'll be on his way shortly, but let's go around the team. I'm going to start actually firstly with Andreas. He was in first. Morning, Andreas. How are you today? What is going on?
I'm doing good. Summer vacation is treating me kindly. Right out of bed, made a cup of coffee, and now ready to talk to some new managers, right? Hoping for some news sooner rather than later.
Exactly. And how about you, Luke? You had good rage moments yesterday, but how are you feeling now when you had a little bit of time to sleep on it?
Yeah, I didn't want to come on and rage. It was just more annoying and just some of the ways we've dealt with things. But yeah, I'm feeling a little bit more optimistic today as some of the reports coming out.
Cool. Let's just do some comments before we go through the main show. Mr. Fatal, Herr Fatal, good morning. Morning to Dave. Oi, oi, oi. Morning to Zaid. Morning to Josh. And morning to everyone else who's joining us today. I am interested. It is interesting. I'm not actually going to talk about them too much. So maybe we'll just start this quickly before we go over the names that are linked. Marty Cifuentes, that's someone who you duck. You're a big fan of Marty. What do you think of him?
Yeah. I mean, I obviously haven't watched the most QPR football in the world, right? But I have a few friends who are massive QPR fans, and I know they were over the moon with him, incredibly happy. And obviously, it's clear the results he delivered for a club who was in the dumps when he came in, right? Really, really good results he's delivered with them. I know he does have some shortcomings. I think any manager we get will have some shortcoming in the situation we're in. But from what they said, they think he would be a great fit for us. I trust their opinion. I think the results speak for themselves when you look at how QPR have developed under him, being relegation battlers to, now sitting pretty comfortably mid-table. So, yeah, I mean, I'd have a look at him if I want to say the two, but if Rohl in particular maybe doesn't fancy the chance.
Yeah, I will say Marty Cifuentes. I remember when QPR came to the King Power and they beat us 2-1, you might remember, that I think what was impressive is that the way that they played, you could see the organization, because obviously we played them twice that season. First time in the season, we relied on Harry Winks scoring that wonder goal, but they looked pretty poor, QPR. That's when I think Gareth Ainsworth was their coach.
Yeah,
and when Marty Cifuentes with them, just a few months later, the improvement in them was really, really impressive. And I think that's what someone else on this list is also going to show. So, hey, morning, Reese. Good to have you here. I'm very interested to see who you think the new manager should be, Reese, given that you, of course, were the one that was very anti-Van Nistelrooy and was calling for King Carlos Corberan, of course, going to be there. But let's get underway. So, we believe that a new manager appointment. Do we think it will come soon, or how long do you think it will take before we bring someone in? Any ideas?
I would honestly hope that it would be tomorrow. To be honest, if you're after July 1st, whatever, I don't think it really matters. To be honest, this whole PSR thing, I think it's not going away. I think it's inescapable. I don't think we're going to be able to break even or even be in surplus. So I think if we're going to break rules and just get a manager in now, let's have an organized preseason to put us on the front foot for not only next season, but the season to follow after that if we appoint the right manager.
I'm thinking relatively soon. They kind of have to, right? They've pushed themselves into a corner. They could have had plenty of time had they 4 weeks ago, sacked Van Nistelrooy. Then we wouldn't be sitting here saying you have to do it soon. But I'm thinking there is a chance that King will be managing the first friendly game on the 4th of July. I don't think that's unrealistic, but I'm expecting manager news not tomorrow. I think the rumors will be circulating this weekend because, obviously John Rockin does need his weekend off, right? Can't be working on the weekend. And then they'll get something done towards, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday maybe will be announced, and then King will take care of the game or whatever, and the first training session will be Saturday or whatever. So that's what I'm thinking. Gut feeling.
Yeah. I think it will be done this week, to be honest. But as you said, he may not be taking charge of the game next week. But hey, we have a look at the next Manchester odds. Now, of course, these are changing all the time. And it's interesting that at the moment in this particular odds, Sean Dyche was favourite, but we'll come to in a moment. The article from John Percy seems to rule him out. You never know, though. There have been obviously, back takes and things like that in the past. But here are the latest odds. You've got Sean Dyche, Danny Rohl, other names mentioned, Michael Carrick, Gary O'Neill, Liam Rosenior. I don't believe that for a second, although we covered them in the previous report. And also there's the talk of Andy King. But I say what, just before we start looking at our first candidate, which is Danny Rohl, we have another welcome face to the panel. Here he is. It's Chris from Leicester Till I Die TV. Morning, Chris. I haven't had a chance to speak to you since the big news from yesterday. So what have you made of everything?
About bloody time. I mean, what has taken them so long? I mean, in the meantime of us doing all this, we know they OH Laven sack a manager, they appoint a manager. We can't get out the starting blocks, but finally it's happened. I think it was a bit earlier. I think it caught a few of us by surprise. We were expecting the 1st of July, but apparently yesterday was payday for the July wages, and that's apparently why it went in, and it counts as July for PSR reasons. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just like, I could not have gone through another season with him, and he didn't want to be in charge anyway. He didn't want to manage in the Championship, so why keep him? I mean, hi guys, how are we all doing? Sorry, I'm late.
It's all good. Save the best till last, as they say.
Oh, you creep!
You're on mute, mate. You're on mute, mate. You're on mute, Luke.
I'm glad I was on mute. I said, Chris, you're looking proper intelligent at that collared shirt, man. I'm digging it. I better still be in your wheel for all that backdrop behind you. I love always seeing all that merchandise. I'll tell you what, if we don't appoint a manager soon, you're going to be polishing all that alcohol behind you to your right.
I was actually on Talk Sport the other day, and there was it was a video show, and they actually looked at me and went said, "Oh, good display behind you. What's your favourite piece?" I'm like, "Well, the stuffed Filbert Fox. What do you bloody think's my favourite piece? The Premier League trophy."
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris. We're just going through now the latest manager odds, and I've got to ask you, firstly, because I have no idea who right now would be the person that you would want. Who do you want to see as the next manager of Leicester City Football Club?
Is Manny about?
He's not. You've literally come on for him. So
no, we had a bit of a do yesterday. Not a do, we had a bit of a discussion, shall we call it? For me, I mean, look, I'm going to say first of all, if Gary O'Neill gets the job, I'm going to start supporting Burnley. That guy should never be let anywhere near our club. For me, and this is probably not going to be a popular answer, but the guy that sat at the top of the list, Sean Dyche, I would have him in a heartbeat. I wouldn't mind Danny Rohl, don't get me wrong. I can roll with it as much as everybody else. Chris, don't do it. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I just think, for me, it's got to be Sean Dyche.
No, we'll get on to the gravel one in a moment. I do have to say that just before you joined, Andreas and I were talking, and I said, I bet you Chris goes for Sean Dyche. There you go. So we'll go.
But I like to disappoint you.
Yeah. Well, it's all right. I mean, I defended Sean Dyche in the show before, so I think I always try and look at things critically rather than just having, subjective opinions. Before we do, let's have a look at what the media is saying. So one of the Wednesday reporters says, understand that Danny Rohl is indeed one of the names in the running for the Leicester City job. His negotiations over Sheffield Wednesday Football Club exit could make things easier if the Foxes do pursue his signature. That's a bit of the hold up at the moment. And this is from the John Percy article, the bomber that he dropped obviously yesterday, said Sheffield Wednesday's Danny Rohl will emerge as possible target despite fears over the amount of compensation required if it remains at the rival Championship club. Sources have dismissed the prospect of former Everton and Burnley manager Sean Dyche taking charge. I don't know who that source is. It could be Luke having a rager. It could be someone else. We don't know. But that's what it says in the article. But like I say, Leicester have done odd things in the past. It doesn't mean it will or won't happen. So let's start at candidate number one, Danny Rohl. Now, I think for a lot of people, who is he? That's a question that came up the last time that we looked at him. He is currently manager of Sheffield Wednesday. But he has an interesting career. And I think the interesting thing about him is that he had a very, very middling, I think even saying middling is being generous, professional football career. He only ever played at a sort of very low level, only a few seasons, didn't make it. So he's had to sort of make his way into the game sort of the old-fashioned hard-working way. He's actually quite similar to Will Still, I think, who we can cover a little bit later, who's obviously gone to Southampton. So we can see here that he actually started back in 13-14 as a video analyst with the youth team at Red Bull Leipzig. Then he's worked his way up, became the assistant manager of the youth team, then the under-17s, then he moved on to the main team proper as an analyst again. Then he became the assistant manager at Red Bull Leipzig, and he was working under Ralph Hasenhüttl back there. Obviously, went to Southampton. Then he's gone, and you see here that he went to Southampton with Ralph Hasenhüttl, followed him there. Then he went to Bayern Munich as assistant manager to Hansi Flick. They did something relatively impressive there. They won the treble. They won the European Cup. Nothing major, but fair sort of things there. He was even assistant manager with the German team, again with Hansi Flick before he got the sack. And then after that, he's gone on to Sheffield Wednesday. So that's pretty impressive, I would say, given that he's not a sort of Nepo baby, maybe like Top, who's been handed the reins of something. Chris is totally unimpressed by this. It's all about the big name. I think some other things to look at here.
Any chance, Neil, I can just quickly inject if you go back to
before,
please. Right? I think take a look at one of the managers he was under at RB Leipzig as a video analyst, Alexander Zorniger. This is a manager I'm really familiar with, as he's just recently with the club in the city I live in, been promoted and been hired as manager to take over in the Danish top division. And the kind of brand of football is, towards the RB Leipzig style, but it's really fun and interesting football. I've been watching their preseason friendlies, following along, think if they can survive in the top division. And it's high press, it's energetic, it's fun to watch. And it's about running, it's about fighting. And it's, I think, something I would like to see in the boys, even if maybe it isn't the most technical, demanding football. It's really nice to see a pitch of 11 players putting everything out there, right? And I think, just take a look at some of the managers he's been under. And I think Zorniger, if he's learned something from him about this, I don't want to say suicide football, but hard battling, pressing football, I think that would be great to bring to the King Power.
Yes, I agree with that. I'm going to show you some clips of Wednesday playing under him. I will say as well, he's the only candidate on this list who so far has not been sacked from a job. Everyone else, there's a reason why they're available.
Then he would approve.
Yeah, and that reason is because unfortunately they have had a failure. And admittedly, Danny Rohl is only 36, so he's quite young in that regard, but he hasn't failed yet, and he's done a very impressive job at Sheffield Wednesday. Now, I wanted to show you this because I think this is, the most impressive thing. So firstly, here's a look at the squad. And this squad is quite the clanger. They spent a total of just 5 million this season. And you look at this team, and the star players, if they have any, I've mentioned this before, are the Charles brothers. You've got Pierce Charles in goal. He's only 19 years old, really highly rated. I think he's one of their big sellable assets, Sheffield Wednesday. And the other one is they brought in Shea Charles. You might remember that when we got relegated last time around, Southampton, that was their marquee signing that they made. It was ex-Man City under-21 captain. And because Southampton were in the Premier League, they loaned him out and he played the whole season. He can play either as sort of a centre-back or CDM. And he was I think he actually won their player of the season. So he did very well with them. But this is not the best squad, I would say. And yet, we'll get to the table in a moment. Sheffield Wednesday finished 12th. They finished above Norwich. They finished above Hull. They finished above Watford. They finished above Stoke. All these teams have much, much bigger budgets. They spent more on players, etc., etc. And he had a reasonably good record. There you go. And in the end, they finished 12. I think that's actually their highest position is where they ended it in the season.
When he came in, right? Like he was, they were dead last.
That's obviously in the previous season. So I want to be a bit careful here because I don't want us to get banned. But this is actually a little bit look back. This is called Danny Rohl, The Great Escape. And we're going to see a little bit of how they play and some of the sort of clips and stuff like that. So let me forward this on. And because, there's not so much, of course, in a highlights reel, every team's going to be good. But what I'm looking for is, are there patterns of play? Where's the team working together? He's come from that kind of German system. So you're talking about kind of energetic football. Sort of 3-3-4 is what they like to play when they're in possession, which is a bit different to 3-4-2-1, etc., etc. I'll kind of move it on a little bit. So yeah, I think it's pretty impressive, what they so let's move it on a little bit to more clips. What he's achieved there, especially given the sort of resources that he's had available there, and is that yet had a failure. So I can see from chat, I think there's a lot of people that are quite in favour. I can say that one person who, of course, he's here to troll us. So let's give it to Chris.
It's Tim coming in. Right, let me say that from the start. I just don't think he's the man for the moment. And what has he done in this country? He
survived. He got Sheffield Wednesday, survived with them when he started with the worst record in Championship history, and kept them up with a couple of games to spare.
Also, he's won a lot in this country, then, has he?
Say that again.
He's won a lot in this country, then, has he?
Well, with his youthful career, he's done a lot. Yeah,
we have got to get this next appointment right. Like I say, I'm not against Danny Rohl getting the man. If he got the manager's job, I would be more than happy. He is in my top 2. Let me put it that way. And he is affordable because apparently because he's not been paid for a few months now. He's been able to renegotiate his get-out clause, so it'll only cost, I believe, £1 million compensation if we were to get him in.
That's pennies.
It is. When you think these days, if we can't afford £1 million, we might as well pop up and go home. Although, having said that, we can power at the moment. You don't know, do you? So I'll explain more when we come on to the Ginger Mourinho. I'll explain more why I would prefer him. But yeah, I just think we've got to get this right. Because if we don't get this right, and it might even, with the best manager in the world, nobody's had a lot more experience, but with the best will in the world, we might not get up this season. We could get 12 points deducted, and that would be a really impossible job for anybody. So, I just don't know if he's the right man that can get us up. It might make us a very attractive team. It might make us, look good and play well. It might be, we get a few years in the playoffs.
Got a comment here from Reese. Come on, Chris. I love you, but get with the times. We aren't in the 80s or 90s anymore. Games moved on. But before you
want to Sean Dyche, I know you're coming up to him in a minute. Like I say, I'm not against this guy, so don't think, it's got to be Dyche over this guy. But this guy has said he wants to go back to it's called an opinion, Josh. You should try having one sometime. You've got to think that this is the guy that said he wants to go to Germany. He's just come from a shit-arse club that's in a hell of a mess. And I'm not saying that, Leicester isn't an attractive proposition, but it's another shit-arse club at the moment that's in a hell of a mess. He may not want that. Don't get me wrong, if he comes and he doesn't work out, he'll get a nice big payoff because that's what managers do. But if he actually said, well, that's what I read. It depends what paper you read, mate. You can say you've not heard him say that. I can say I've read that he said that. It's what one's opinion. It's like arseholes, mate. We've all got one. So,
what do you make of Sean Dyche? Sorry to cut you off there, Chris.
Me or Sean Dyche?
No, we'll just both. What do you make of the Danny Rohl, I guess?
I'll sum it up perfectly for you. So, first of all, I can understand what you're saying, Chris, where you're coming from, like, what's he achieved? Because, to be honest with you, before I did my due diligence in a group chat, that was what I was saying, to be honest with you. But then I did my research, and he's never been sacked, and he's done some great time on some brilliant managers, and he's had to do things, as you mentioned, Anil, the hard way. So now, if he were to get a job with Leicester City, let's say, you could say that from what squad he has available on screen here, not to sound egotistical or like big-headed or elitist, but that squad compared to like a lot of what Leicester City has now is like going from having a garage of Priuses to Ferraris. So he would hopefully be a lot more excited to work with his list and hopefully move his career onto, no one would like to say this, but potentially Enzo's stepping stone style to a bigger club. But that would mean he'd put us in a position of being better in the future. If we go for Dyche, you might say that's someone that might be more siege mentality, might be able to take no bullshit, no prisoners. But the problem is if Dyche were to hypothetically go to get us up, then in my opinion, it would be the same position. He's going to get backed with Dyche players in a system that doesn't work anymore in the Premier League. And in my opinion, it would put us backwards and we'd be repeating the same cycle all over again. So if we're going by what we see in the journalist reports that Top wants possession-based football, but Rodkin probably thinks this is a safer appointment. This screams to me all last season all over again. We're going to put all our eggs in one basket for Graham Potter. That didn't work out. Let's panic, and now let's get Steve Cooper. I don't want to see that happen again, because every time we do something and make an appointment like that, it sets us back 2 to 3 years. I would rather set us up better with under Danny Rohl. Even if we don't go up the first time, I think would be a better position if we keep Danny Rohl in 2 to 3 season times compared to where we'd be with Sean Dyche, regardless of what league we're in, Premier League or Championship. That's my honest opinion.
Okay, coming back to you then about, and I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. But we've got to remember where we are. We could have a transfer embargo, right? We could be in a position where we cannot buy any players. So this guy's going to have to come in and, work with what he's got. Now, I've had a couple of shows recently with Dan, from Turf Moorhouse TV, the Burnley guy. And listening to him, because I was very much going towards the Manny style of, get a manager in that can move on and then we can replace him with the same, pick the style and then get the manager to suit it. If we've got a transfer embargo, a business plan, so we might have to sell some players, and which we're going to probably lose a few of the good ones anyway, and we're getting a points deduction, this is the guy who can get in, for me, and stabilise things. And looking at a 3-year period, if we don't go up next season, and I personally don't think we will, I mean, all this talk about, we're going to finish top and we're going to walk it, we've got the best squad in the division, bollocks, we haven't got the best squad in the division at all. You're telling me that Decovery, Skip and those sorts of people make it the best team in the division? No, it doesn't. What he will do is he will stabilise things, he'll get us up, because he's good, he's done that in the past, got teams up, and he will keep us up. And we're not saying, I know what you're saying about Steve Cooper, but let's be honest with you, the football, whether you like it or not, we were playing better under him than under Van Nistelrooy.
I'm sorry, Chris, you can't get away with saying we played better under Cooper, mate. I think that's a shock.
How many points did he have in 12 games? And how many points? You're saying we played better under Van Nistelrooy?
All right, time out, guys. We'll come back to this in a second, just because we've got a new guest who's joined us. I'll give you the floor in a moment, there, Duck. We've got straight into it. I knew what this stream would turn into anyway. Before we do, let's just say hello. Here he is. Here comes Manny. How are you, Manny?
Morning, boys.
Obviously, we didn't get the opportunity to speak to you yesterday, so I'll give you a few minutes. Before we jump into next manager, talk to me first. What did you make of the Rude sacking?
I think we all knew it was coming, didn't we? He was a dead man walking for a while. Maybe he could have been put out of his misery a bit sooner, and we could have been. It was inevitable. I don't think there's any way that any manager can lose, 15 out of 17 or 16 out of 17 and keep his job. It just doesn't happen anyway. So it was always a PSR thing, of course. But now that it has happened, a few days early than we thought, actually, maybe 1st of July was going to be the big day. But to not sort of have ideally something lined up is a question mark. I do understand why they might not have a manager ready, but it just seems like with all the off-field stuff and the Rude stuff, just chaos, isn't it? The manager's going, but the goalkeeping coach is staying because we might get 15 quid for him. It seems a bit of a mess, again, as usual, just the latest mess at us. It's just such a shame that you think like Southampton had their guy, he was a good quality guy, he was available, they took him off the shelf. And now I walk into this morning's meeting and all I got was Chris and duck at each other about Dyche. I've spent hours talking to Chris and all I'm hearing is, Chris, what's all this Dyche stuff you're coming up with this morning?
It's called having an opinion, Manny. We are allowed one,
That's true.
Yeah,
So before we get the popcorn
sadly,
out, which will come to in a moment, so let me just present the case for Sean Dyche. Let's try and be neutral before I'm sure we'll come up with the opinion. So here's Sean Dyche. Let's at his record here. So, Sean Dyche has been in the English game for a long time. Started obviously in the sort of youth team setup with Watford. That's actually where he knew Sean Dyche, because back then, Rudkin, before he became the DOF at Leicester, was actually in the youth setup at Leicester. That's where they know one another. Of course, his big stint was over in Burnley, there for a very long time. Won the championship with them, got promoted a few times. Did get relegated with them too, has to be said, but also got them into Europe at the expense of us one season, which I think is probably his best achievement that he achieved with them.
Didn't even qualify though at the end of the day. Battled out of
but let's just say let's try and be be So, objective, not subjective here. It's a fact. He did get them into Europe. That's better than Claude Puel did at Leicester with a higher budget, I would say. And you can also see that he has achieved, with both Burnley and Everton, he got a more than 1 point per match record, quite comfortably above that both times. And even though he did get sacked at Everton, I don't know. I don't really personally ever really think they looked like going down that season, mainly because of us, because he was so bad. But he did ultimately get chopped in that particular time. So there you can go. He was there for them. I think even at Everton, whilst his brand of football, I think, was quite hard on the eye, you will have to say that he also was thrown into some quite difficult circumstances when he first came in. Didn't have much that he could spend on. Had to take over from Frank Lampard. Did keep them up at our expense. James Maddison's penalty, rip. Jordan Pickford helping him out. And they didn't really look like they were going to get relegated. But they have subsequently moved on. Just taking a look at his last squad. This was against Bournemouth, which they lost before he then got sacked. You can see this is what he was working with. And you can see that Dyche did move to a 4-2-3-1. I think it's a bit unfair to say that he's just 4-4-2 and lump it forward. He definitely does love his transition. But he did evolve a little bit with the style. I think Ilman and Dyche, that was, I think, a good signing that he picked up, done well for them. Jesper Lindstrom, so he kind of went more towards a sort of wingers route. He got Jared Branthwaite playing quite well. Although at the same time, you've got the Ashley Young being, of course, the irony, because Ashley's almost 40 these days. Pickford, very good for them. So there you go. So, all right. I think, there's a few more managers that we will look at. But that's Sean Dyche. So I guess I'll hand over to Duck and Chris. You're both having it out there. So Duck, Sean Dyche, talk to me.
I mean, I think I've been one of the most, I want to say, pro Dyches in this call, except for now Chris has come in and completely taken that mantle to a different dimension. I think one of the things that Chris was talking about in terms of we might have an embargo. I first and foremost don't think we'll have an embargo, but obviously that could happen, right? But at the end of the day, we won't be having many resources to spend regardless of if it's an embargo or not. I think look back to the situation that Sheffield Wednesday is in. If there's one club in England that's worse ran than Leicester at the moment, it's Sheffield Wednesday. And look what he's managed to make out of that situation. He spent, 5-6 million in total over the 2 years he's been there. And he's taking them and really improved what he has got there. And I think that's one of the things that I really like about him as well. Like, look at how he's taken a bad team, spent a little bit, and improved them tenfold. I think that's what I want him to do at Leicester as well, right? Because we have the players there. We might not right now have the best team in the league, but we have the best talent in the league. I have no doubt about that. Looking at some of the youngsters we have breaking through in Spade, Ben Nelson, Stolasic, Manga, Evans. Like, if he could improve just 3-4 of those and make them top tier championship, it would be absolutely brilliant. I don't think any of these managers are, the perfect fit, because that's not the situation we are in to get a perfect manager. I also think some of the people just discrediting Dyche completely is also very, very harsh on him. And I've been very much against many in some of the shows we've been on, completely writing him off as if he's the worst manager to ever breathe, when he's done really well in the Premier League with very little money as well at Burnley. Because the same argument I just made for Danny Rohl on improving things with little budget, you can go back, look at some of the money he spent on Burnley in a few seasons. Sometimes he's only pulled players from the youth academy up and kept them in the Premier League for another year. So obviously you have to give him some credit. I just want to see some exciting football along the way, and I think Rohl would be the man to deliver that more, and that's why I'm leaning towards him. But yeah, I mean, I can see many of Chris's points on Dyche, and I don't think he's completely wrong. What he was wrong about, though, was that we were playing better under Cooper than Van Nistelrooy. I think that's complete shambles.
Chris, over to you to respond.
We played better under Peter Taylor than we played under Ruud van Nistelrooy. Name me any manager, it was better than Ruud van Nistelrooy. Look, I said at the start, I am not against Danny Rohl. If Danny Rohl was our next manager, I would be more than happy. All I'm saying is that we shouldn't dismiss somebody with Sean Dyche's experience. Yes, it might be Route 1 football sometimes, but sometimes these managers do tend to get lumped with a particular style, even if they've moved on, even if they've changed. Everybody says Sean Dyche plays old players and what have you, but he developed Burnley's youth, as we found out yesterday, Manny. But look, if it's Sean Dyche, I won't complain. I mean, I didn't complain when it was Steve Cooper. I thought he was probably the best of what we were likely to get. And I'm not saying he would have kept us up, But I think we would have seen some better bloody performances than we saw under Ruud van Nistelrooy, which was, I say, some of the worst football since, Frank McClintock was manager. So if it is this guy, I won't complain. If it is Danny Rohl, I won't complain. What I just want is I want Top and John to agree, because they didn't agree with Cooper and Van Nistelrooy. Hopefully they can agree with the next manager, but they've got to get it right. That's the important thing. And they've got to stick with it. And the fans have as well. If it is this guy, let's get behind him. And if it doesn't go right straight away, we've still got to stick with him. And yes, we change our managers, I think every 16 months it's on average. We're turning into like Watford Mark II.
Not getting that quite there, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, but also you've got to think, if it is Danny Rohl, we've got to give him time as well, because it might take him a while. I 100% agree with those youngsters. In a way, I'm kind of hoping we do get a transfer embargo, because it will probably make us have to play the youngsters.
Yeah, that worked well with Chelsea a few seasons ago, didn't it? They actually got to the Champions League, and then when they could buy players, they bought pretty poor players. I'll come to you, Manny. I want to bring up a few comments that I think are fair. So here's one from JB, and this is the point I always make with Sean Dyche. I'm not his biggest fan, but I think this is fair. Because look who's on the left wing on that page. Is he a typical crosser? No. The narrative is boring. It's not like he's completely dinosaur football. He has definitely moved on with his tactics and things like that. But I think this is also a fair point from Josh Silvers. Then made another comment I'm going to bring up. He says, my problem with Dyche is he goes against the positives we have in our squad. We don't have enough of the type of players he requires to play his style of football, which is physical players, I would say. That doesn't necessarily have to be tall, but they have to be sort of fast and willing to work hard. You could say that's a problem in general. And, I think this is a problem in general, although you could argue this is why we need Sean Dyche. Dyche of our squad will not work. Our players will go to the top within 6 weeks complaining, probably for kind of hard work. So, Manny, what do you make of Sean Dyche?
What's the point of having Seagrave, training all these kids to play a certain style of football, training your own first team to play a whole style of football, and then asking them to do something alien concept to them? How is Dyche's style compatible with our personnel? That's a question for you, Anil. Explain that.
Well, I don't think he is. I think that is the strongest argument against it. I agree with you. I think the big thing that I looked back at the data is that even when Burnley won the championship, which to be fair was a long time ago, it's like over 10 years ago, but they were the last team in the championship to win it that had possession of less than 50%. So it shows you that even then they played a more, I wouldn't quite say they were counter-attacking, but they weren't looking to dominate the game. Now, I don't have a problem with any side of play that you decide to pick up. But as you've just mentioned there with your squad, if you have a squad that's been built for possession football, which we know we have, right? Because that's literally the players that we've signed, that does kind of feel like a bad fit right from the off, because you're not going to have those type of players who are going to be able to play that sort of style. So that is an issue. And yeah, that is, I think, a big elephant in the room with Sean Dyche.
Back in the last season, how excited were all of us with Monga, Evans, and these kids? Suddenly some energy, some youth, some talent. How do you think they're compatible with Dyche, Neil?
Well, that I think is another big worry as well. I will say that having looked back through some of his record, he did do things like he promoted Dwight McNeil. I think back in the day, he actually got a good tune out of Danny Ings. So I think it's unfair to say that his track record of youth is horrendous. That's not fair. But I will say,
Mikulenko.
Branthwaite, he didn't bring him through, and for most of his career, didn't play Branthwaite. A lot of the Everton fans have been complaining, saying he doesn't pick him enough.
Yeah, they did say that, but
I don't think.
Well, like I say, I mean, I you know who my number one pick is for sure, right?
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm trying to play it like a lawyer sort of thing, or if I was in the jury and who is committing a crime.
Out of 10, 11 years, we're scratching around for 2 or 3 examples, and one of those is debatable. We're talking about 10, 12 years of management. We can come up with 2 or 3 between us. Dwight McNeil's always what I hear. Dwight McNeil and maybe 1 or 2 others. In 10, 12 years, we've got 3 or 4 kids we're trying to bring through, plus Fatah, who's still only 20, 21. Plus we've got a young keeper in Jakob, who's 24, I think Jakob is. He's relatively young for a keeper. We've got Ben Nelson, who's very, very young too. You know, these aren't necessarily the kind of players that he's going to want to give game time to, because we know what he's like. He's going to say they're not ready. They need more game time somewhere else. I need somebody who's going to deliver for me today. None of this tomorrow nonsense. We got to get up now. And that mentality actually might work in the short term, saying, yeah, we got to do it now. But then these kids get disheartened. Then Jeremy Monga doesn't want to sign the next contract because he hasn't been given game time. Ben Nelson, maybe he does fancy going to Chelsea on the bench because he's just going to be sitting on the bench at Leicester as well. So, again, there are longer term issues with someone like Dyche, because all the things that we have, in my opinion, that are good long term, which is the youth, the Seagrave, the ability to develop those youth, it's not really something. They're not going to see a pathway to the first team under Dyche. And you end up, the agent just goes, this is a waste of time being here. And when you're trying to track a replacement kid, oh, come to Leicester. We've got all these lovely facilities. Oh, and we've got some 16, 17, 18-year-old talent. I'm not getting in the team at Leicester. Why would I go there? The average age is 29. It'd be a silly place to go. And all we end up doing is creating a cycle where we just keep signing functional journeymen to keep the same cycle going, i.e. just stay in the Premier League, just stay in the Premier League, just stay in the Premier League. And for people who say, oh, at that point, we just get rid of Dyche and then we transition to this magic passing team that can move on. Said nobody ever. When has anyone ever done that? What happened to Burnley after Dyche? Did the next manager, were they capable of utilising Dyche's foundations and moving that club forward onto the next level above that? No. They just started yo-yoing.
And what's happening to Everton right now? I mean, take a look at what happened when he got that. That's pretty successfully translated, right?
You're talking about 3-4 months, and the only manager probably in the world who could take Dyche's ingredients and utilise them because they match his own style as well. Moyes is like super Dyche.
Though, it's a bit too many hypotheticals, though. Like, we're talking on the edge of what's so hard to really judge, right? Because think back to Burnley. Their academy sucks ass, mate. They've got no great talent, really.
No, it's level 1 now. It was level 3 under then. Yeah, exactly. So what's the point in having a level 1 academy if the manager's not going to use it?
I think
we don't really know, though. It's depending on the case. Look at Gareth Braithwaite. He played 3,000 minutes last season. He was the same age as Ben Nelson will be at the start of next season. He played 3,000 Premier League minutes under Sean Dyche. Mikulenko played as well.
This guy likes to use older. It's a fact.
It's a tendency for sure.
He likes to use older, more experienced, more robust players. We have just had a season where we spent the whole year bitching about our older, more robust players. It didn't work for us. Maybe it works if he can bring in Tarkowski, Michael Keane, Brownhill, and all these other boring players. But with our version of Dyche, at the moment still Cody's and Vestergaard's and Wout Vass's, this is not going to work. We might go up, but we will either come straight back down or perennially be stuck in this cycle of just about staying up, hopefully not going down. Now, I think that's a lack of ambition. We're Leicester. I want to do more than just stay in the Premier League. I want more than that.
You've hit the. I'll just be quick. You've hit the nail on the head. This is what I've been saying as well about this cycle as well. I think it's really incredibly short-sighted to continue going this cycle, and it goes against every single manager appointment. It is a very conflicting of the manager that was appointed before them, and it's very short-sighted. And there's nothing progressive about that whatsoever. And unfortunately, we're not going by the same model of selling a player for a lot of money every season. So every time we do this short cycle, bring a conflicting style of manager in, back him, then he gets sacked. The next manager comes in and can't progress with that the squad because it doesn't fancy him. And then we're not selling players, or at least if we are selling players, we're not selling them for what we bought them for. We're continuously to bleed money, and it's just going to make it dig us an even bigger of a hole. So unfortunately, I'm not in favour of Sean Dyche either, purely for that reason. He won't play our youth. The only silver lining we have about dropping down to the championship, in my opinion, is these young players that we're having high hopes for, whether it be, Evans, Monga, Alves, and stuff like that. The players and Nelson, if we're not going to send him out loan because we need him for next season at the championship, when we bring in Dyche and we don't play him and they don't get loaned out because we need him because we're probably going to lose players, in my opinion, it's going to even further hamper the development. So in my opinion, I want something progressive. That's my 2 cents. I'm in favour. I agree with Manny, and I'll hand it over to Chris. But yeah, I want to see something we can build upon, not a continuous cycle of just utter shite.
I'll come to you, Chris. You give me the last word on Sean Dyche because I want to move on from talking. Because as we say, John Percy said he's not even going to be at the club. So over to you, Chris. Yeah.
You said we believe in John Percy. John Percy's got a hotline to top, has he?
He is somewhat reliable.
He is, but even Fabrizio gets things wrong sometimes. Let's not take. He's not God. He doesn't command something and it happens, John Percy. He's a reporter. He bases it on bits of information he gets. But anyway, it comes down to the interview, right? If when we're interviewing him, hopefully if we're giving him a decent interview, we're going to ask him about the youth. We're going to say to him, look, we've got all these young players that we want to develop, and see what his response is. And if he doesn't give a proper, decent response that the club want, then he should not even be considered for the next stage. And again, Manny, you said this on my show yesterday about the next manager after Dyche. Again, that's down to the club, because the club, that wherever he's at, whether that's Everton or whatever, should get a manager in that can do something with his players. And if they don't do that, then that's
you can't turn strong, robust footballers into ballers. You can't make. You're not going to make. James Tarkowski is a good, solid defender, really good at defending. He's good at set piece sort of stuff, but he can't play cultured football at Man City. It's not that kind of player. You can't then suddenly say, "Oh, we got Sean Dyche's ingredients: those strong, robust team set pieces and defensive." How many players
did David Moyes buy when he took over at Everton?
Well, like I said, David Moyes is the only person that I could possibly think of in the world who could.
He's only been at 3 clubs. He's only been at 3 clubs. So how many examples do you want?
There's only one person in the world who can take a Dyche team forward that I can think of. Perhaps you could think of somebody else beyond Moyes who also plays in that mould. The old guys who used to do this stuff, whether it's Allardyce, Wilder, Roy Hodgson. God, I mean, they've all gone. Steve Bruce, they've all gone. Nobody wants them anymore. They can't get jobs, so they've been forced to semi-retire or retire. These guys are history. Dyche, Moyes, Wilder are the last 3 that I can think of in the top 2 divisions, and Wilder's just got the chop, having got beaten by a young, progressive team, foreign manager, by the way, in the playoff final, where his robustness didn't help him because they bottled it. Dyche has just got sacked at Everton because he stanked the place out for 6 months, and you forget. They were on a similar points level to Steve Cooper / Ruud van Nistelrooy until he got the chop. That's the level we're talking about, with better resources, by the way. He had a Premier League team, and he could barely muster what we could muster.
And he also kept them up. He also kept them up with a points deduction at our expense. Look, I can say that I'm not saying that he should get the job. I'm just saying we shouldn't dismiss him.
By the way, he didn't qualify for Europe. They got knocked out in the qualifying round.
They got knocked
out in the qualifying round.
Yeah, okay.
They didn't make the main competition.
I think if I can just shortly round this off, I think Manny, I agree with you. I'd much rather have Rohl. I just think you end up sounding a bit too disingenuous when you're looking at a lineup here where I can see plenty of somewhat young players. There are some very old fellas in there, like Ashley Young.
Right.
Branson, Mikulenko, Lindstrom, and Dyche. Amanda Breyer's not exactly 35.
Do you have a graphic of any of his teams from last year by any chance? I know that's
I think it's a completely correct worry to have that he would look to De Cordova-Reid and Ayew over some of our youngsters. And I think it's a right thing to be worried about. But to say as if he's never played someone under the age... Manny, let me finish here.
No,
because I think we're about to move on. But what I want to say is I just hate the fact that once we have our opinion, we completely close off the idea of anyone else being somewhat qualified for the job. You can at very least respect some of the things Sean Dyche has done. You're looking at a lineup right now where 4 or 5 players are not over 35. At the very least, just admit that. Look at that.
But yeah, yes. Oh, whoa. Yes, right now. But this is what I want to do. I want to look at his team from last year and the team from his first year at Everton. And so, what I think has happened, he's gone in, done his Dyche thing, and the board have said, look, the fans aren't having this. They're bored out of their mind. They're starting to get annoyed. If you don't try and evolve, and if you don't try and sexify this up because nobody wants this turgid, boring stuff.
Sexify?
It's theoretical. We don't know what happening.
So hold on.
Now we're just making shit up.
No, let me finish. I said this is my supposition. I didn't say it was facts. I said it was my supposition. I didn't say it was the truth. I said this is what I'm guessing. So I think he would have been told, if you don't sexify this team, you are out the door. So here's Ilian NDI. He's a brilliant winger. He's the kind of player we want. Here's a other guy in Jesper Lindstrom. He's a young lad. Give it a go. Try and reduce them. Give the kids a chance.
Go on, Manny. That's what I want. I'm keen to say, before you sign the dotted line, sexify this team and you'll be fucking sacked, cunt.
Look at Anil. If everyone's laughing, what my cinema laughing is, Anil looks like he never wants to talk about Dyche ever again. He's going to support Burnley before Chris does at this rate.
Exactly.
on to
And from
Michael
that,
Carrick.
we're moving on. Time out. On to the next candidate.
One very last point. I did do a survey on my ex, and Manny knows what's coming. I did a survey on my X and Facebook, and the question was, would you like Sean Dyche as your manager?
You did it on Facebook, mate. It's the Boomers. What are you expecting?
No. 78.9% said they'd want him. They're still supporters. You youngsters don't have the be-all and end-all. You've only known success at the club.
But that's like saying I'm going to the retirement home and I'm asking them about if they want Sean Dyche. Of course they would, mate. If you went to the retirement home after they won Steve Bruce over Rool.
And X as well.
And X as well, yeah.
Should I have asked on Instagram?
But Chris, you make that point like it somehow means that's what we should listen to. When should you ever listen?
Let's move on.
If the majority of fans think it's probably definitely not the way to go.
I'm not like you, Manny. I accept that what I say isn't fact and should be bowed down to by everybody.
Ooh, spicy Chris, come on.
You know I'm joking. You know I love you, Manny.
Let's talk Michael Carrick. Carrick.
Exactly. I'm going to put a poll in the chat anyway. We were going to end with that. And I also have some developing news from someone who's texted me, so I'll mention that at the end. Yeah, the drama indeed. But we always like these sort of streams. You knew it was going to be fun. That's why I kind of signed up for this. I'm going to have another show tomorrow as well, so we'll continue this. So next one up, which I think is unlikely, but there were rumours that he was coming in earlier, including, I believe, some players even thinking that he was going to be the person appointed. And that's Michael Carrick. And, I bring you back. The reason we're looking at this is, according to the latest manager odds, Michael Carrick is actually the number 3 favourite for the job. So Michael Carrick, he was assistant manager at Man United. Obviously, as a player, what a Rolls Royce for a player. Firstly, can we just say, English sort of chavvy. I mean, maybe Manny will probably laugh at me for saying that, but he was one of the few players in that deep lying position who could actually play make who is English. Really good player. He was assistant manager to Jose Mourinho for 24 games, then assistant manager to Ole Solskjaer. He then went to Middlesbrough to start his career. And at Middlesbrough, he had a terrific first season where he got to the playoff finals. They only lost they lost in the semi-finals. They didn't make it to the finals, but they had good sort of stint to them. This was his team. He only got sacked at the end of the season. They were in the hunt for the playoffs all the way to the last day, but they lost to Coventry. You can see their squad here, though. They had a pretty good squad, I would say, by championship standards. Morgan Whittaker, you might remember him. Finn Azaz, another good player. Samuel Illing Jr. on loan from Juventus. Dale Fry is good defender at this level. Neto Borges, they signed from France, good attacking left back. But I think it's fair to say in this particular season, it's the reason why he got the chop. He underperformed. I think while we just talk about him as well, this is actually all the way back from when we were looking at Chuba Akpom, who we obviously didn't sign. But this is the season where he managed to get him to be the championship top scorer, I think, with 30 goals. And I think you do see some of the way that Borough play in some of these clips. So I'll leave this playing in the background while we talked about this. So, Michael Carrick, what are our thoughts on him? I'll start with you, man, as you've only really just joined. What do you think of Michael Carrick as a manager?
Was a good player at Man United, and now we're considering to be our manager. I'm getting a bit of deja vu here. Haven't we literally just done this? Like, is anybody paying attention? Has a half-decent record somewhere else, is a big name, was a cultured player, an excellent player. Could he come in and do a job? No. We just had. He's had many years at Borough, and if you look, each year it's been getting worse. Now I know that Steve Gibson hasn't. He's turned the taps off at Middlesbrough quite a while ago, and fair enough. The guy's been an incredible chairman for them for many, many, many years now. But Michael Carrick, you had your chance to impress, and with all due respect, Steve Cooper could take Nottingham Forest into the playoffs in this league. Sean Dyche can get you up in this league. Daniel Farker can get you up in this league. With Middlesbrough, that is, you should have made more of an impact than you did. I know they've been kind of in the mix, but this year in particular has been disappointing. And now, to some extent, you lost Latte Lath. That was a big loss. He was a good player for you. But when you end up seeing, a tubby Iheanacho coming on the pitch, this is tragic stuff. Like, you're just getting desperate now, aren't you? You're like, who can we find to try and be a catalyst for us? He looks overweight, but he's willing to come for 150 grand a week. I mean, Michael, maybe you just
Carrick
need a
did beat
restart.
Enzo twice.
Yeah,
Has
yeah,
been
yeah.
said.
Definitely better. Sign him up 5 years right now.
You are right, and I'll tell you, and that is the one caveat I can give. But you don't pick a manager on the basis they did well against you. This is normally how we pick our players. They had a good
That's
game
like Pip
against
Van
us.
Nistelrooy, isn't it?
Exactly.
That was the joke in the
Beat us
Percy
twice.
article.
So beating us in a head-to-head match, or a player playing well against us in a head-to-head match, is no basis to pick them for your long-term solution to anything. So Michael Carrick is nice guy, seems pretty bad. I've got the feeling. Do you know what? He is just an assistant, because part of being a manager is you need a bit of what's the word? Chutzpah. What's the word? You need a bit of.
Do you mean aura or what?
No, I think that's a Jewish word for like ballsy. You need aura, a bit of character, a bit of excitement, intensity, that kind of thing about you. Like Mourinho, Klopp, Pep, they've all got intensity of character. I know they're the extreme versions, but even Enzo, you talk to Enzo, it's not often a laugh and a joke. It's business. It's business time all the time. And Michael Carrick just seems like he's like your quiet mate who always buys his round in the corner at the pub. He's a really nice guy. Everyone likes him. But is he an inspirational leader for your club? No.
Anyone else from the panel want to talk about Michael Carrick? I just thought I'd bring this up. So I think you're right to say that he underperformed this season here, Manny. His was the championship table from last time round. You can see where they finished. They finished below Millwall, Blackburn. They almost went down the season we did. Bristol City outperformed them. I think this also shows that they weren't that only a few 6 points better than Sheffield Wednesday, Danny Rohl, but the resources were so far different. But they did do better than Norwich, Watford, Stoke, Hull, also who were really good this season that we almost went up, really underperformed last season. But I think he got sacked because the expectations were that they would get into the playoffs at minimum. They missed out on the last day. If results had gone their way, they could have done it, and they didn't make it overall. And so that's ultimately why he's paid the price. It remains to be seen, but that was a decent squad. But if you look at the teams above them, I think, for example, you wouldn't expect them to outperform Leeds, Burnley, Sheffield United. But I think from that point on, even Sunderland, who did a good job, it's not like their squad was massively better than Borough's. Coventry, I think, probably do then have the best squad out of those top three. Panel, anything you want to talk about Michael Carrick?
No, are you ready for this?
Go on.
Here we go. I actually agree with everything Manny said.
Oi!
Get out! No, go on.
No. I know. Somebody put a vodka in my coffee. No, I do. I agree with everything he said about Michael Carrick. Nothing I can disagree with him on that. Said everything I would have said, basically, but far more eloquently.
There you go. Mind blown. All right, well, we'll move on. There is one other person that I think... go on.
I just want to say quickly, I think he's boring. I'd rather have Sean Dyche. And that's kind of saying something.
Really? Dyche over Carrick? Interesting.
I'd rather have Dyche over Carrick. I think Dyche at the earliest proven to get us out of the championship. But I think Carrick, every time I've watched him under Middlesbrough, I've not been impressed. Obviously, Rohl is by far and away, out of the three candidates, my number one choice. But it's just saying he would be third on the list so far of those we've gone through.
Yeah, I do think it's pretty damning against Michael Carrick that they've got worse season upon season. I think that is a fair point to kind of make there. But all right, I want to bring one further name into the picture, which I don't think anyone wants, but just because we don't want it doesn't mean it's not going to be the thing that will happen. So currently, the person who will most likely be leading Leicester next week in our first pre-season game is Andy King, the legend himself, made in Leicester. King at the moment is a coach. He was managing the under-18s and he was promoted by Rude to be part of the first team coaching setup. And there are rumours that if no one else wants a job, which is possible, if finances really are tight, if we are supposedly going to have an off-season, that you might end up with Andy King. And there's a rumour that he would be backed with assistant manager would be Chris Powell, who has been a manager in his own right and was also assistant to Sven-Göran Eriksson at England, also played for Leicester at one point in time, you might remember. And it might be those two who come in charge. So we see it right away, no. Sooner have Richie Wellens and King. Give it Kingy till the end of the season. Someone's here said they only have King if we get an experienced number two, Ella Pearson. So Frankie, what do you make if it was Chris Powell? I mean, look, I'm going to say this right now. It's not something that I want, but could I see it happening? Yes, I could see it happening Because let's say that you get given, let's say we don't know what happens behind the scenes, but let's say the club knows we're going to be given minus 15 points as an example, right? At that point in time, it is going to be hard to get anyone into. I'm not sure, for example, Sean Dyche comes in if you're minus 15 points. Does Danny Rohl come in if you're minus 15 points? And what if it's a case of like this is an off season and we have to basically appoint someone next season instead? And therefore, we need someone to firefight in that time. I don't know. So I wonder what your thoughts are if that scenario ends up happening. Or is it, even if that's the case, that we just cannot afford to take the risk and let Andy King be in charge? Who wants to take this one?
I'll go first if you want.
Yeah, go on.
And no, we all love Andy King. Goes without saying, the guy's a hero. He's won every division virtually. But it's too soon for him. It's too soon. Let him carry on. I don't even know if he's got all his badges yet, has he?
No, I don't think he does.
No. So would he? Therefore he couldn't really manage unless there's an agreement done. And I think it could ruin him, if you like, in a way. Mm-hmm. Let him develop. Bring in an experienced number one. And look, do you remember? You're probably all too young to remember Liverpool before Alex Ferguson went to Man United. They had the great success because they were promoting from within. So when that one manager left, they came from the famous boot room. So, Andy King, we get a new manager in, wherever that is, if he's in for, 3 seasons, whatever, Andy King may well then be ready for him. God, I'm even agreeing with Josh as well. What's going on? but he will develop, he will learn. Too soon for him now. Like I said, I don't think he can anyway because of his badges. Whoever comes in, have him as possibly your number 2 or one of them. You have to have just one number 2 because the new manager probably want to bring his own in as well. But look, Claudio had 2 with Shaky and whoever the other guy was. That for me, keep him as number 2, let him learn, and then but he probably would possibly be ready next time.
Yeah, I think keep him in and around the first team regardless of who comes in, because he has very good knowledge about the youth we have coming through, right? Having worked just a bit with the golden generation we have on the cusp here, helping them transition. So I think that's the big thing, right? Whoever comes in next, King should be there to help continue assist the development from the academy and bridge that gap. And hopefully the new manager would listen to his suggestions. But yeah, I think everything we've heard about being him described as a person and his tactical knowledge, he sounds like he could be a pretty decent manager in the future, but this is far too soon for such an important job in the position we're in.
Yeah.
Plus, if he does, very quickly, if he does then get promoted, he will do like Manny wants, and he will continue the style of play that was happening under the guy that has just been sacked to get him the job.
That would be the idea. Well, I was going to come to you, Manny, because the reason I think I could see Andy King getting the job is because Brentford have basically done this. I have to say, I think Brentford are taking a massive risk. I know that their fans are quite worried if you look on their sort of media and stuff like that, but they do have a very smart owner. So Brentford, they've obviously lost Thomas Frank, but rather than appointing a new manager externally, they've appointed their set piece coach, who, to be fair, was part of the first team setup, and he's going to be their new manager going forward. So could we see something like that at Leicester? I appreciate that, he hasn't got as much experience, but equally the Championship isn't as competitive as the Premier League, right? And you've got a much stronger squad to start with. This is a division where we've seen Scott Parker get promoted multiple times, etc., etc. So what are your feelings on this situation?
I think the most overhyped, overused, overrated word in football is experience. I think experience doesn't count for dick. Excuse my French. It doesn't mean much to me. I think there's so many examples, particularly of modern football, where experience doesn't help you. Experience doesn't help as a player. Experience doesn't help as a manager. And experience is being phased out of the game. That's why most of the best players in the world are actually under 25. You're going to struggle to think of 10 brilliant players over 25. So I think that this is actually 50-50 with Danny Rohl for me out of the ones. I wouldn't want Dyche or anything like that. I don't want some boring old experienced manager. I want some youthful, exuberant, next level, cutting edge manager who understands the modern ways of playing football and how the game develops. And rather than experience, I think there's other characteristics that shrewd clubs, value way over that. So, for example, Bayern Munich have obviously appointed from within for decades, Barcelona from within for decades,
RB Leipzig.
Real Madrid, RB Leipzig, Madrid, Zidane, Del Bosque. These are guys who basically didn't manage anywhere but Madrid. And not just there, there's other examples of people doing it now. And we've already been through the merry-go-round, of the Pep disciples and how they don't have any experience, but Arteta didn't have any experience. Assistant manager gets the Arsenal job. Enzo, 1 season of management, gets the Chelsea job. Bayern Munich take Vincent Kompany after going down on 1 year's experience. The Parma have just taken Carlos Cuesta. We've already talked about Carlos Vicens at Braga. Clubs are not valuing experience. Hold on, let me finish. They are willing to take that gamble on people without experience. Pep Guardiola himself, considered the GOAT, had 0 experience when he got, well, you could argue Barcelona B, but real, proper, big-time experience, none anyway. He gets the Barcelona job. So I don't think experience is the key characteristic. What you're looking for is the person right for this job at hand. So for this particular job, Leicester, who knows Leicester City better than Andy King? He's been there through League One all the way up, the journey up and down. He knows all the key individuals. He has all the fans on side. He has all the goodwill in the world. If Andy King has a stinker the first 10 games, you'll get a small percentage. I told you he wouldn't have experience. But I think a lot of us in this particular situation with an embargo, lack of money, trying to bring kids through, Andy King would gain that respect of those kids because he's a Premier League title winner, because he's won every division, because he knows the Championship too. He knows the Championship, make no mistake. So this managerial experience that everyone goes on about, I know Locks loves talking about a bit of managerial experience, and Neil's just spoken about Brentford. Brentford are owned by Matthew Benham. Matthew Benham is one of the shrewdest chairmen on the planet. That is why he took Brentford from Nowheresville to being a consistently regular Premier League team. People just are passive about that. Like, Brentford, standard Premier League team. Never in our history of Brentford being a Premier League team. Never mind a standard Premier League team. That is because their chairman is as shrewd as it gets. He's massively a money baller, massively into data. I know that they have... I went to a conference by Matthew Benham, so I've heard him speak. He gave a keynote speech where he identified that the fact that they knew that Bundesliga 2 players were the similar standard as Championship players.
Yeah.
They could
that was on YouTube, wasn't it? I've seen something like this. It's really fascinating. It was
20. I think it was 2015 at the Emirates. They did a conference there. And there's about 400 guests, and I was one of them. And they spoke about how we can find Championship quality for a quarter of the price and a quarter of the wages in Bundesliga B that no one else looks. They bought FC Michelin, which Duck will know, as their feeder club. And from what I remember, FC Michelin had no real Danish history. And he's taken them... Did they win the league?
Yeah. Won 1 or 2 leagues. 3 leagues.
But they'd never done it before then, right?
No, they were formed in 1999.
Okay, so a club formed in 99, he took to the top of Danish football through super shrewd Moneyball system data analysis. So when this person appoints Keith Andrews, who was Chris Wilder's, not even assistant, Chris Wilder's coach in 2023, and last year got appointed as a set-piece coach for Thomas Frank. So he's not assistant, he's the set-piece specialist. Brentford have gambled and said, do you know what, we know this person. We can hear the way he speaks, to hear the way he talks, we can hear his ideas, and we believe in this guy. That is the kind of thinking that makes you appoint Fabian Hertzler, a 31-year-old, as from Bundesliga B, as your manager in the Premier League. Brighton just had a solid season under him. With all due respect, the people at the helm of Brighton and Brentford know more than most football fans, virtually every football fan out there. They have transformed their clubs from being Nowheresville to consistent Premier League solidarity. So rather than thinking Brentford are doing something risky and crazy by appointing their set-piece coach, what I choose to do is take it as, these people are super sharp, why have they done it? Because I know that they're not daft. So those kind of reasons would therefore give you, to bring it back round, is to thinking that Andy King is not such a daft idea. He knows the club. He knows the place. He's already had 6-9 months. He's worked under Nigel Pearson, or he played under Nigel Pearson in multiple areas. He's played under Ranieri, Brendan. So he's heard these ideas. he's not a daft human being. When you hear him speak, he's very calm, he's very measured, he's bright. I don't see why Andy King wouldn't actually work, and I think I'd get more excited about Andy King than Sean Dyche for sure.
The thing is, though, I agree with what Manny is saying. It's a trend in Denmark as well. It's really risen in popularity, appointing the number 2, right? Copenhagen has won 2 league titles, 2 Champions Leagues. They appointed the assistant of Johannes Hoff Torup when he got Hoff Torup. Yes, another guy called Yes in Denmark who's now managing Augsburg. They sacked him, got his assistant in. Same in Brøndby, they sacked the main manager, got their assistant in. It's a rising trend, but every single example Manny has given has had more than 6 months. Keith Andrews, been at Milton Keynes, been at Ireland, been at Chris Wilder's team. Pep Guardiola turned the Barcelona B team into an unbelievable team. You mentioned Vincent Kompany, 2 years with Burnley, with Anderlecht as well, one of the biggest clubs in Belgian football. Enzo Maresca won the U21s with Man City, been to Parma for 14 games, but at the very least had some senior manager experience. Fabian Hürzeler, promotion with that's the thing, right? Like, I think this is just too little. You don't even have your UEFA Pro license. I'm all for the bold appoint from within because it is about developing a culture. It's about knowing the club, and it's something we can get behind in a time of need where our owners are not Tony Bloom, are not Matthew Benham, but are absolutely clueless. So, obviously, Andy King has so many positives about him that I do like. You know, the fact that he knows our youth, he would utilize it. But it's too soon. It is too soon.
I agree. I agree with that. I agree with what you said. You made some brilliant points there.
Yeah.
And I agree with what you said. It is too soon in an ideal world. But if we've got a 12, 15 point embargo, not much money to spend, and maybe some managers are reluctant to come to us, and given a 12-point embargo, you almost get a free roll as a manager because you've always got that excuse. Oh, well, what do you expect? He's got no money. He got a 12-point deduction. So the fans can't jump on him. And if he almost gets a whole season's grace to get that experience, and then in 12 months' time, we could be in there next summer saying, okay, we finished 10th, 9th, but look at the conditions he was working under. Now that those conditions have gone, we've got a lot of our legacy contracts off. We've got money to spend. The embargo's lifted. Kingy could really build the club forward. I would rather get behind Kingy because I think you're right about all those things you said about having a bit of experience. In an ideal world, you would want that. But there has to be an element of how much are you intertwined in the fabric of the club? How much do you know the club at hand? And all the things that a manager spends the first 3 months, 6 months learning about the culture of the place, the playing staff, the fans, the rest of it. Kingy already knows that. So he's already done the first 3-6 months work that you would do anyway. He's probably been doing that in the background while he's been there. All the kids will know him in the youth team. He was working with them not so long ago. So, he already knows all about Jeremy Monger and Cartwright and Aluko and Evans and the rest of them. All of this stuff means that you could fast track him probably quicker than you would ideally like to do. It's a gamble, and I'm not necessarily sold on that gamble, so I'm not saying we should get Andy King. What I'm saying is I can make a stronger case for Andy King than personally I can for even Sean Dyche. I know a lot of people say, oh, experience, what has he done? I'm not thinking about what he has done. I'm trying to believe or have a faith in what I think he could do.
Yeah, just want to bring this up. When's the last time a top 6 club appointed a novice?
Barcelona appointed Pep.
Yeah, again, Arsenal, Arteta, but quickly, I think the biggest example I can think of is actually Chelsea had a transfer embargo, you might remember, and they appointed Frank Lampard, who'd been at Derby, and he was considered the failure at Derby because they had the big wage structure there with Mason Mount. They didn't get promoted, and they ended up getting in the Champions League at our expense. You might remember that. And now the subsequent season they did badly, but because he knew the culture and he knew the players, because he'd worked them in the under-21s, he got them to outperform. So look, I don't think anyone on a panel is saying Andy King is the first choice or anything like that. But we're saying that what happens if the club ends up being in a situation where basically our hand is forced and we're just in a terrible situation that we can't resolve things. And that is the worst case scenario. But I'm just bringing it up because unfortunately, the way that Leicester City are right now, worst case scenario could be the scenario.
And this is not a new concept. Chris pointed out earlier, for those old enough to remember Bob Paisley, Joe Fagan, I know Chris will, those guys didn't have any managerial experience, but they knew Liverpool inside out. They knew the fabric of the club, how they play football, the standards required. All the youth team players know those guys because they've been part of the furniture. So Andy King has been part of our furniture beyond his playing days. I mean, he didn't really play for the last 2-3 years of his career. He sort of hung around and kept everybody happy. But with him, and particularly if you could bring, you know, an assistant is a key point. You would like a key
It's
assistant.
about the backroom team, right? It has to be correct if you go for King, I think.
And Chris Powell seems quite sensible. He's a very likable, very humble, very good assistant. He's not got the sort of stature to be the first man, but he's the guy who is the glue. I think a lot of people would like Chris Powell.
Wasn't Andy King also assistant to Pearson at Bristol City for a short time?
He was working as a coach with him, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But not as assistant. But it's still quite interesting. Anyway, look.
To finish on the thing is, somebody at some point, for a manager to become successful, somebody's got to take a gamble on them.
Mm.
This could be the one where we take a gamble and it works out. But that's what it is. It's a gamble. You know, if we don't do it and somebody else comes in and he turns out to be the next Pep or whatever, we'll regret it. So all these managers, when they make a start, somebody takes a gamble on them. And, you know, if he'd got all his pro licenses, I think, you know, it'd be a different story.
Yeah,
interesting. All right, well, look, we did a poll in chat, and actually Danny Rohl has ended up winning with 69%. Sean Dyche was second, 18%. Someone's asked how many times did Chris vote for Dyche. Andy King, though, got 10%. Michael Carrick, only 1%. I only gave 4 options there, to be fair.
I agree with that.
Stream, but I did say the latest that we've heard, though, is that Danny Rohl is in pole position with actually Chris Powell as assistant manager. Chris Powell at the moment is an assistant coach, not assistant manager, assistant coach at Sheffield Wednesday. And apparently the Sheffield Wednesday assistant manager would take over at Sheffield Wednesday as the manager. So we would have some sort of continuity, and I guess we'd end up with some sort of coaching staff. It's a bit of a hodgepodge between Danny Rohl's setup and whatever's at Leicester. That's what we're hearing. We have no idea if that's true or not. We will see what happens in the future. But look, let's close the show. That's been an hour and 10 minutes. Quite a lot of drama. Go on, Doug.
One last thing. And this is whatever happens, we are standing in front of a crucial season with a points deduction and financial issues. Whoever comes in that door, we all better get behind them. If it's Danny Rohl, if it's Sean Dyche, if it's Andy King, you better get behind the manager. I don't care what your personal opinion is. You better give him a fair shot.
Until I see Ayew start over Fatawi.
Manny, shut up. You better give him a fair chance, and then you can make your opinion. But we're in front of another crucial season, and I don't want to see someone be appointed, and within the first preseason game, we're calling for their head already. I can't do that again, man.
And on that, we will leave it there. So thank you so much. Thank you, Manny. Thank you, Duck. Thank you, Chris. Thanks for joining us. This has been Blue Tinted Glasses. We'll be back tomorrow at 9:30 for Good Morning Foxes. I think we're just going to talk about this all over again, is what I suspect. So we'll see you that one. See you then. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.